Don't just walk past him, she whispered to herself, heart hammering in her chest. The rain-slicked street glistened under the harsh glare of the neon lights, reflecting the chaos of the city and the storm above. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the figure lying motionless on the curb, the dark coat soaked through and hair plastered against his forehead. Cars splashed by, indifferent to the scene, the rumble of engines mingling with the steady patter of rain. Naomi Carter, 25, worn from a 12-hour shift at the downtown diner, paused at the edge of the puddle, her sneakers squelching against the waterlogged asphalt, eyes narrowing as she assessed the situation. She had seen tough nights, walked streets where the forgotten lurked in shadows, but nothing like this, and yet instinct propelled her forward. Her mind raced, recalling lessons from her childhood in a small New Orleans apartment, where her mother had taught her that courage wasn't loud, it was deliberate, it was the choice to act when most would turn away. She knelt beside the man, her hands steady despite the chill, checking that he was breathing, noticing the shallow rise and fall of his chest, the tension in his limbs that whispered he could not move. The world seemed to hush around them, the usual city hum muted by the gravity of the moment. Naomi's fingers brushed the soaked fabric of his jacket, feeling the heat of life still there, a fragile flame in the storm. "It's okay, you're not alone," she murmured, voice soft but firm, anchoring them both in the moment. She scanned the street, calculating, planning how to get him to safety without drawing unnecessary attention, balancing speed and caution. Her heart thudded as adrenaline surged, yet her breathing remained controlled, a skill honed from years of balancing multiple jobs and responsibilities, a life lived with awareness sharper than most could comprehend. She lifted his shoulders gently, maneuvering him into a more sheltered alcove beneath the awning of a closed shop, the raindrops pelting down around them, splattering against the concrete and echoing like distant drums. Every movement was measured, deliberate, as she created space and cover, adjusting the position so that he would be protected from both the elements and the passers-by who might stumble without noticing. Naomi glanced down at his face, the lines and contours momentarily illuminated by a flash of lightning, and for the first time, she saw the eyes, half closed, registering faint recognition, confusion, and vulnerability. The moment twisted in her chest like a blade. This was no ordinary man. There was a weight behind those eyes, a presence that spoke of power and influence, though worn, battered, and momentarily vulnerable. The realization hit her quietly but with undeniable clarity. This was a man who commanded rooms, whose decisions shaped industries. And yet here he lay, human and fragile, dependent on her for survival in this fleeting instant. Naomi adjusted her grip, whispering again, guiding him as best she could, every action infused with calm authority and empathy, a silent promise that she would not let him be abandoned here. Her own story, the long shifts, the sacrifices, the quiet endurance, converged in this act, translating into competence that neither arrogance nor wealth could replicate. As she moved him slowly toward the safety of her small car parked nearby, the storm roaring around them, the city continued its indifferent symphony, unaware that in this narrow slice of time, a choice, a single act of courage, had rewritten the rules of power and visibility. Each careful step, each breath she took alongside him, carried the weight of unseen histories and the sudden inversion of expectation. The young black waitress, the observer of life's inequities, now the keeper of a man who, by all appearances, had everything, and yet depended entirely on her guidance. The rain-plastered hair, the glint of wet asphalt, the neon reflections all formed a cinematic tableau of reversal, the ordinary made extraordinary through the steadfastness of character. And as Naomi finally settled him into the passenger seat, fastening his seatbelt with gentle precision, she caught a glimpse of his face through the rain-smeared window, eyes fluttering open, momentarily alert, and in that instant, the narrative shifted. The powerful were not always untouchable, and the smallest, most overlooked hands could hold the fate of those who once seemed invincible. The car engine hummed quietly as Naomi drove through the slick streets, rain still streaking the windows, blurring the neon signs of closed shops and shuttered cafes into smears of light. Her hands gripped the steering wheel with a steady determination, the weight of responsibility pressing in, yet her movements remained calm, deliberate, practiced. In the passenger seat, Ethan Monroe shifted slightly, eyelids fluttering open and closing again, confusion and vulnerability etched into his features. Naomi glanced at him, noticing the fine lines around his eyes and the subtle furrow in his brow, indicators of a man accustomed to control, now momentarily surrendered to circumstance. She spoke in measured tones, not too loud, but firm enough to guide him. "We are almost at a safe place. Just a few more minutes." The streets outside reflected the rhythmic pulse of the city, the occasional honk punctuating the ambient white noise, but within the car, a bubble of focus and care surrounded them. As Naomi navigated a tight corner, she recalled the small apartment she shared with her roommate, how she balanced college classes and 3 part-time jobs, and how those experiences had honed her ability to act decisively under pressure. It was that same composure that allowed her to check Ethan's pulse, adjust his position for comfort, and keep him conscious and oriented. The interior of the car smelled faintly of rain and leather, the muffled roar of the storm outside serving as a backdrop to a fragile dialogue between 2 lives suddenly intertwined. Naomi spoke again, softly. "Can you tell me your name?" Her voice carried authority wrapped in reassurance, and Ethan's lips parted, struggling for words, the effort evident but unhurried. "Ethan Monroe," he finally managed, voice raspy but clear, and a flicker of recognition passed over Naomi's face, confirming the weight of the moment. She allowed herself a brief glance at the dashboard clock, noting it was nearing 3 a.m., and realized how long it would be until they reached her modest apartment. A sanctuary where she could continue to care for him safely. Every red light, every turn she made, was calculated to minimize risk and maintain the delicate balance between urgency and control. As they drove, Naomi kept a gentle hand on his arm to reassure him, noting the tension in his shoulders and the subtle shifts in his breathing, each detail informing her next action. The car rolled past empty storefronts and silent parks, the reflections of streetlights tracing the contours of Ethan's face, highlighting both the vulnerability and the unmistakable authority that lingered beneath the surface. Naomi thought about the contrast between the man he had been in the boardroom, commanding teams and decisions worth millions, and the man who now relied on her presence, her guidance, and her calm assessment to navigate a storm both literal and metaphorical. She spoke again, carefully choosing her words. "You are safe now. Just focus on staying calm. We will get you warm and dry." Ethan nodded faintly, the first sign of trust forming in the quiet tension of shared space, his eyes tracking hers, searching for assurance and finding it in her composed demeanor. The rain intensified, pelting against the windshield, and Naomi adjusted the wipers to maintain visibility, her mind alert to every obstacle, every potential hazard, aware that in this moment, her actions defined the outcome for both of them. She could feel the weight of her own fatigue, the long hours and the emotional strain, but it was irrelevant compared to the responsibility she carried now. The car approached a nondescript building in a quiet side street, its facade illuminated by a single flickering street lamp, casting long shadows that seemed to dance in the rain. Naomi parked carefully, ensuring the vehicle was sheltered from passing traffic, then turned to Ethan, steadying him gently as they prepared to move him inside. She spoke again, softly but firmly. "I will help you inside. Just follow my lead." His hands gripped hers lightly, a silent acknowledgement of reliance and trust, the unspoken understanding between 2 people connected by circumstance and choice. The steps inside her apartment were small, but manageable, Naomi supporting him with careful guidance, each movement precise, considerate of his limitations and the fragile balance of his condition. Once inside, she helped him to a comfortable chair near the heater, wrapping a warm blanket around his shoulders and offering a sip of water from a nearby glass, all with deliberate attention to comfort and safety. Ethan's eyes, now fully open, took in the surroundings, modest furnishings, a small bookshelf, and the faint scent of home-cooked meals lingering in the air, grounding him in reality far removed from boardrooms and wealth. Naomi stepped back slightly, allowing him space to adjust while remaining attentive, her own breath steady, her posture composed, ready to respond to any sign of discomfort or need. In the quiet aftermath, The rain continued to tap against the windows, a rhythmic reminder of the storm outside, while inside, a fragile equilibrium was established, the powerless momentarily empowered by choice, care, and the unexpected human connection that had brought them both safely to this point. Naomi moved quietly through her small apartment, the heater humming softly, wrapping the warmth around them like a protective cloak. Ethan Monroe sat with a blanket draped over his shoulders, eyes scanning the modest furnishings, the simplicity of the room a stark contrast to the sprawling offices and glass towers he normally inhabited. Naomi fetched a glass of warm water and handed it to him, watching as he accepted it with a tentative hand, the gesture small but loaded with unspoken acknowledgement. She guided him to a small sofa near the window where the rain still tapped rhythmically against the glass, creating a steady backdrop that softened the tension in the room. Every detail mattered. The placement of cushions, the gentle adjustment of the blanket, the soft murmur of reassurance as she checked his comfort, speaking in a calm, measured tone that emphasized safety and attentiveness. Ethan's breathing began to even out as he absorbed the care, the shift from vulnerability to trust taking shape silently. Naomi's eyes traced the lines of his face, noting the subtle expressions of gratitude and surprise, the kind that were rarely permitted in the boardrooms where he held command. She recalled the countless nights she had worked double shifts, balancing jobs and responsibilities, each one teaching her the patience, focus, and awareness that allowed her to act decisively now. She moved to the small kitchenette, setting down a kettle to prepare a simple tea, the aroma of chamomile filling the apartment, signaling comfort and calm. When she returned, she offered him a cup, her presence steadying, each movement precise, reflective of a practiced grace born from necessity and resilience. Ethan accepted it, the warmth spreading through him physically and metaphorically, a gentle reminder that safety and care could exist outside of wealth and power. He attempted a small smile, tentative, as if testing the boundaries of trust, and Naomi responded with quiet encouragement, the unspoken dialogue between them building a fragile bridge. Outside, the rain continued, the city muted under the downpour, a distant hum of life providing contrast to the intimate space they now shared. Naomi kept a steady vigil, observing his responses, ensuring he remained comfortable, while mentally planning how she could provide further support until he was fully stable. Every gesture, from adjusting his position to ensuring he had adequate warmth, carried the weight of experience and empathy, the cumulative knowledge of navigating hardship translating into precise and caring action. Ethan's eyes followed her movements, noting the attentiveness, the patience, the absence of judgment, a stark departure from interactions dictated by wealth or status. The small apartment, with its soft lighting and quiet corners, became a haven, a space where power hierarchies dissolved, leaving only human connection and the recognition of need. Naomi's thoughts briefly drifted to her own life, the long hours and sacrifices that had prepared her for this moment, yet she remained entirely focused on him, prioritizing his comfort, his safety, and his dignity above all else. She spoke gently, narrating each action as she adjusted his blanket or guided him to a more comfortable position, ensuring he was aware of her intentions, fostering calm and collaboration rather than passive dependency. Ethan absorbed the care, the subtle guidance, and the deliberate, patient attention, realizing that influence could manifest not only through wealth or command, but through quiet decisiveness and humanity. The storm outside, relentless yet distant, mirrored the turbulence of recent events, but within the apartment, the controlled environment and Naomi's attentive presence created a stark contrast, a microcosm where the ordinary acted with extraordinary consequence. As the minutes passed, a rhythm established itself. Naomi's careful actions, Ethan's tentative responses, the ambient sounds of rain and heater, all intertwining to form a delicate equilibrium of safety, trust, and mutual recognition. She allowed herself brief, internal acknowledgement of the unusual position of power she now held, not over wealth or status, but over life, stability, and immediate well-being. Each decision, each movement, carried the potential to reinforce security and dignity, teaching without speaking, guiding without force, and establishing a foundation of trust built on calm, deliberate, and empathetic action. Naomi stepped back slightly, observing Ethan as he settled into the warmth of the small apartment, her eyes scanning for any signs of discomfort or confusion, ensuring each breath he took was measured and steady. The rain outside had slowed to a gentle drizzle, the streetlights casting long reflections across the wet pavement beyond the window, creating a serene, almost cinematic backdrop that contrasted with the intensity of the previous hours. She moved to the bookshelf and retrieved a blanket, neatly folded, layering it over him for added comfort, speaking in a calm, reassuring tone. "You are safe here. Just relax and let yourself rest." Ethan nodded slowly, his gaze following her movements, a mixture of astonishment and gratitude evident in the subtle shifts of his expression. Naomi then filled a small basin with warm water, dampening a clean cloth to wipe the light grime from his hands and face, careful to maintain dignity and comfort in every motion, her hands steady, her focus unwavering. She glanced around the apartment, noting the modest furnishings and the simplicity that contrasted so sharply with the grand offices and boardrooms that Ethan would normally inhabit. Yet she found no judgment, only an understanding that circumstance could render anyone equally vulnerable. Naomi spoke softly, explaining her actions in deliberate, gentle language, each sentence a thread of reassurance and stability. "This will help you feel a little more comfortable. We will take one step at a time." Ethan listened intently, the usual pride and command tempered by circumstance, as he realized the precision and care of her actions were driven not by obligation, but by empathy and deliberate attentiveness. Naomi moved around him, adjusting the pillows and positioning, mindful of his needs while maintaining a calm and composed presence, each gesture measured and meaningful, a quiet assertion of control through care rather than authority. The room was filled with the subtle hum of the heater, the occasional distant sound of traffic, and the muted drip of rain from the eaves, creating a rhythm that mirrored the steadying pace Naomi established through her actions. Ethan began to relax incrementally, his tense shoulders easing as he absorbed the security of her presence, the awareness that someone was fully attentive to his condition, responsive to his needs, and unwavering in their commitment to his safety. Naomi checked his water, ensuring he could sip without strain, observing the way his fingers gripped the cup, guiding his hands gently to facilitate ease of use, speaking in soft, deliberate tones to reassure him with every step. As the minutes passed, she reflected on the unusual reversal of roles, where the normally commanding figure of immense wealth and influence depended entirely on her decisiveness, patience, and empathy to navigate this situation safely. The subtle shift in power, from boardroom dominance to reliance on human care, became apparent to both of them. Yet Naomi remained focused on immediate priorities: warmth, hydration, and comfort, each action reinforcing trust and calm. She offered a simple snack, a piece of fruit she had on hand, arranging it within easy reach, speaking quietly to explain the small gesture and the reasoning behind it, ensuring Ethan understood both the practical and symbolic care she extended. The storm outside continued its gentle pattern, rain tapping softly against the window pane, and within the apartment, a fragile balance of recovery and human connection emerged, a sanctuary from the world beyond the walls. Ethan's eyes met Naomi's once more, a subtle acknowledgement passing between them, a silent understanding that the ordinary act of attending to another's basic needs carried immense weight, bridging social and experiential divides, and redefining the context of power and dependency. Naomi remained by his side, vigilant, attentive, and composed, each movement intentional, each word chosen to calm and stabilize, the rhythm of care transforming the apartment into a space of trust, reflection, and a quiet reclamation of dignity for both. The quiet of the apartment settled around them, punctuated only by the soft hum of the heater and the occasional drip of rain from the eaves outside. Naomi moved efficiently, arranging blankets and cushions, ensuring that Ethan remained supported and comfortable, her attention to detail meticulous as if each small act could reinforce the fragile trust that had begun to form. She brought over a notebook and a pen, suggesting gently that he might want to jot down any thoughts or observations, a way to engage his mind without exerting physical energy, and he accepted hesitantly, the simple gesture a subtle recognition of her foresight and care. The room, modest yet tidy, felt like a sanctuary, the muted glow of the lamps creating a warm cocoon around them. And within this space, the balance of power shifted imperceptibly but undeniably. Ethan looked at Naomi, noting the calm precision of her actions, the way she moved with a quiet authority born not of status, but of competence and empathy. And for the first time in hours, he allowed himself to release a slow breath, the tension easing from his shoulders. Naomi spoke softly, explaining the steps she was taking to monitor his condition, her words deliberate, measured, and designed to instill confidence. "We are going to take this slowly, making sure you are stable and comfortable, and then we can think about the next steps." Ethan nodded, absorbing her instructions with a humility unusual for someone of his stature, realizing that in this moment, he was entirely reliant on her skill, patience, and judgment. Naomi adjusted the lighting, drawing the curtains slightly to block the glare of passing streetlights, and placed a warm cup of tea within easy reach, the scent of chamomile spreading a soothing aroma, each detail carefully chosen to create an environment conducive to recovery and mental clarity. She checked his posture again, moving a pillow to support his back, ensuring that every muscle could relax, every joint could rest, and he could focus on breathing evenly and regaining a sense of calm. Ethan's eyes followed her movements, observing the deliberate care, the quiet authority, and he felt a rare vulnerability mixed with gratitude, an awareness that true strength could manifest in attentiveness and thoughtful action rather than wealth or command. Naomi paused for a moment, allowing him to adjust to the calm of the room, her gaze scanning for any signs of discomfort or confusion, ready to respond instantly, her presence a stabilizing force that transcended the typical roles of social hierarchy. She spoke again, gently guiding him through the process of sipping tea, explaining each motion with clarity and patience, and he followed, recognizing the unspoken lesson in each interaction. Trust, empathy, and precision could create safety where chaos had reigned moments before. The rain outside began to soften further, the ambient sound blending with the muted hum of the heater and the occasional distant siren, creating a rhythm that underscored the peaceful, protective atmosphere Naomi had cultivated. Ethan's breathing grew more regular, his mind clearer, as he took in the space around him, the absence of judgment, the presence of deliberate care, and the realization that the evening had become a turning point in understanding resilience, humility, and the quiet power of human decency. Naomi continued her attentiveness, adjusting the blankets, offering sips of tea, checking the temperature, and guiding him with words and gestures that reinforced security and dignity, her composure unwavering, each step a reflection of her experience navigating challenges and responsibilities long before this encounter. In the interplay of soft light, gentle warmth, and careful actions, the apartment became more than a temporary shelter. It became a space where trust was cultivated, where a man accustomed to commanding millions experienced reliance on another human being, and where the quiet determination of one person could transform vulnerability into safety and awareness into respect. Ethan's eyes, now alert yet softened, met Naomi's gaze with an unspoken acknowledgement, the shared understanding that strength and influence could take many forms, and that in this small apartment, guided by deliberate care and empathy, the most profound power lay in the attentiveness and integrity of action. Morning light filtered through the thin curtains, casting a soft glow over the apartment, and Naomi stirred quietly, checking on Ethan as he shifted in the chair, the blanket tucked neatly around his shoulders. The previous night's rain had cleared, leaving the streets glistening and the air crisp with the freshness of a new day. Naomi moved to the small kitchen, preparing a simple breakfast of toast and warm tea, each movement deliberate and calm, her focus entirely on maintaining a routine that offered stability and comfort. She returned with the tray, setting it gently beside Ethan, explaining the meal with soft, reassuring words. "This will help you regain some strength. Take it slowly." He looked at the food, then at her, a faint smile appearing as recognition and appreciation settled in his eyes. Naomi encouraged him to take small bites, guiding him carefully, observing every subtle reaction, adjusting the tray and the seating position to maximize his ease and safety. The apartment felt alive with quiet diligence, the soft ticking of a wall clock marking the rhythm of recovery and care, the mundane yet essential actions forming a protective structure around a man unaccustomed to dependence. Ethan watched her, absorbing the meticulous attention to detail, the empathy woven through every motion, realizing that the authority he had always relied on was now rendered irrelevant in this intimate space where attentiveness and patience dictated outcomes. Naomi kept a steady pace, explaining each action and providing gentle encouragement. If you need to pause, that is perfectly fine. Listen to your body. Her calmness allowed him to focus on simple tasks, reclaiming small degrees of autonomy, and with each step, his confidence returned incrementally. The apartment's quiet atmosphere fostered reflection, both for Naomi and Ethan, who could now consider the events that led to this moment with clarity, the adrenaline of the previous hours replaced by contemplation and an awareness of human connection. Naomi adjusted the seating cushions to better support him, noting the alignment of his posture, and offered another sip of tea, her voice a steady anchor. This is about small steps. Each one matters. Ethan responded to the care, nodding and following instructions, his breathing more even, the tension easing from his frame, and he began to realize the depth of her competence and the intentionality behind each action. Naomi glanced around the apartment, noting the familiar, comforting objects, the small bookshelf, the neat kitchen counter, the faint scent of morning coffee, creating a setting that emphasized calm and security. She provided minor exercises to maintain mobility, guiding his hands and encouraging subtle movements, all while speaking in soothing, precise tones, reinforcing safety, awareness, and control without exertion or force. The atmosphere carried the weight of transformation. A billionaire, used to commanding and dominating environments, now reliant on a young woman whose actions were guided by care, skill, and empathy, a reversal of expectation that was profound in its simplicity. Naomi continued her deliberate attentiveness, observing Ethan's responses, making small adjustments, explaining the purpose of each step, and cultivating a space where dignity and humanity were paramount. The soft light of morning, the stillness of the room, and the deliberate cadence of her voice and movements created a sanctuary where recovery, trust, and respect coexisted, teaching a subtle but powerful lesson about the potency of empathy, the quiet influence of careful action, and the enduring value of human attentiveness and moral courage. Each moment reinforced the inversion of assumed power. Ethan dependent not on wealth or influence, but on the integrity, knowledge, and deliberate care of Naomi, and with each breath, each gesture, the lesson crystallized that true authority can manifest in compassion and the deliberate attention to the needs of another. By late morning, the storm had fully passed, leaving the city washed in a soft, golden light that filtered through the apartment window, illuminating the small, tidy space where Naomi and Ethan sat together. The warmth of the room contrasted with the chilly streets outside, creating an intimate environment where the ordinary rhythms of life could reassert themselves after the night of upheaval. Naomi had prepared a light lunch, arranging fresh fruit and simple sandwiches on a tray, and set it beside Ethan with a quiet confidence, her hands steady, her voice calm, yet filled with subtle authority. He looked at the food, then at her, his expression a mixture of humility, surprise, and growing appreciation, as he realized the level of care and forethought involved in each small action. Naomi guided him through eating, offering gentle instructions and observing every response, adjusting the positioning of cushions and blankets, making sure that comfort and dignity were preserved at every moment. The apartment, modest yet warm, carried a sense of sanctuary, each object placed with purpose, each gesture of attention creating a protective rhythm that allowed Ethan to recover both physically and emotionally from the night's events. She spoke softly, explaining the practical reasons for each adjustment, the deliberate choice of each item in the space, reinforcing safety and stability without imposing, and he absorbed it, recognizing the rare skill and balancing care with respect for autonomy. Outside, the sunlight reflected off the wet pavement, casting subtle patterns across the walls, the gentle illumination highlighting the quiet details of her actions, the careful folding of the blanket, the steady placement of the tray, the way her eyes continuously monitored his comfort without intrusion. Ethan's posture relaxed gradually, tension easing from his shoulders, and for the first time in hours, he allowed himself to simply observe and reflect, taking in the small yet profound lessons of attentiveness, patience, and empathy that Naomi embodied. She moved with calm purpose, checking his water, offering sips when appropriate, and ensuring he remained comfortable and hydrated, her demeanor unwavering, her focus singular, and every motion conveying reassurance. The atmosphere became one of mutual recognition. A billionaire accustomed to commanding entire industries now relied on the careful, deliberate actions of a young waitress who had mastered resilience and empathy through her own life experiences. Naomi offered a gentle reminder of the passing time, suggesting he rest while she tidied the space, and Ethan nodded, feeling both the weight and the comfort of her presence, the reversal of roles clear in its subtle power. Every sound, from the soft tick of the wall clock to the distant hum of morning traffic, became a counterpoint to the rhythm of careful actions, creating a sense of order and security that had been absent on the streets hours before. Naomi maintained a constant, vigilant awareness, adjusting positions, observing responses, providing verbal reassurance when necessary, and creating a space where trust could solidify and dignity could be restored. Ethan's gaze followed her movements, silently registering the depth of her attentiveness, the care that transcended status, wealth, or expectation, revealing a new understanding of the strength inherent in thoughtful action and human connection. In this quiet sanctuary, the inversion of typical power dynamics was complete. The billionaire experienced dependence and humility, while Naomi demonstrated competence, patience, and moral authority, teaching through deliberate, empathetic care the profound lesson that influence and respect could be earned through character rather than command. Each minute passed reinforced the subtle but powerful shift. Safety, dignity, and the recognition of human worth were the true markers of authority, and within this apartment, guided by calm precision and unwavering attentiveness, both Naomi and Ethan became participants in a moment where the ordinary acts of care redefined perception, respect, and the quiet exercise of genuine power. The afternoon sunlight streamed gently through the window, casting elongated patterns across the floor and filling the apartment with a warm, golden hue that softened the space and reflected the quiet progress of recovery. Naomi moved with calm efficiency, checking that Ethan was comfortable in the chair, adjusting the blanket to support his back and shoulders, and making sure that a small glass of water was within easy reach. The faint scent of tea and freshly toasted bread lingered in the air, blending with the residual warmth from the heater to create an atmosphere of safety and care. Ethan watched her movements, noticing the steady rhythm of her hands, the attentive way she adjusted cushions and repositioned him to relieve tension, and he felt a growing sense of respect and gratitude, the realization dawning that true influence often came from patience and attentiveness rather than command or wealth. Naomi spoke in a calm, deliberate voice, explaining each small action she took and why it mattered, her words reinforcing his confidence and providing a steadying presence that allowed him to focus on recovery rather than uncertainty. Outside, the city buzzed faintly with the distant hum of traffic and occasional voices carried on the breeze, yet inside the apartment, time felt suspended, governed only by the deliberate cadence of care and observation. Naomi encouraged him to take slow sips of tea and small bites of the simple meal she had prepared, monitoring his responses closely and adjusting as necessary, ensuring that each interaction reinforced comfort, autonomy, and dignity. She moved to straighten a small stack of books on the nearby shelf, glancing back periodically to observe his breathing, posture, and facial expressions, the soft light highlighting the subtle interplay of trust and attentiveness between them. Ethan began to engage, his responses small but deliberate, acknowledging her instructions and offering feedback on comfort and positioning, the dynamic of reliance and respect establishing itself quietly yet firmly. Naomi guided him through subtle movements to maintain circulation and flexibility, explaining the purpose behind each adjustment with clarity and patience, allowing him to feel empowered even as he relied on her support. The apartment, though modest, became a sanctuary of transformation, where the inversion of typical power hierarchies was evident in the way Ethan depended entirely on her competence, composure, and empathy to navigate the day. Naomi spoke softly about the importance of pacing and listening to his body, her voice a stabilizing presence that allowed him to release tension and embrace the moment of recovery without fear or concern. Every gesture, from the careful placement of cushions to the positioning of his blanket and the offering of water, conveyed a deliberate attentiveness that communicated respect, safety, and care, reinforcing the emerging trust between them. Ethan's awareness of the contrast between his usual life of influence and the vulnerability inherent in dependence grew clearer, and he recognized the value of human attentiveness, the subtle power that resided in calm observation and thoughtful action. Naomi continued to facilitate his comfort, making minor adjustments to seating and supporting posture, guiding him through each step with gentle encouragement, creating a structured environment that emphasized stability, recovery, and the dignity of the individual. The interplay of warm sunlight, quiet vigilance, and deliberate care cultivated a sense of security and empowerment, allowing Ethan to absorb the lesson inherent in the reversal of circumstance, that strength, respect, and authority could manifest through the thoughtful, consistent actions of someone devoted to ensuring the well-being of another. The apartment became a microcosm of empathy, patience, and human connection, where each action reinforced trust and mutual recognition, highlighting that the truest forms of power often arise from attentiveness, moral integrity, and the deliberate practice of care. As the late afternoon light faded into the gentle amber of early evening, Naomi moved quietly around the apartment, checking once more that Ethan was seated comfortably, the blankets arranged precisely to provide both warmth and support. The faint hum of the heater filled the room, mingling with the distant sounds of the city settling into evening, the occasional car passing by, the muted rhythm of a world continuing its normal course outside. Naomi brought over a small cup of herbal tea, placing it carefully within his reach, her voice calm and deliberate as she suggested, "Take small sips and let the warmth settle in." Ethan accepted the tea, his fingers brushing hers briefly, a silent acknowledgement of the care she provided and the trust that had grown steadily throughout the day. He looked around the apartment with a newfound awareness, noticing the modest but purposeful details, a neatly folded blanket on the arm of the sofa, the small stack of books that had been arranged earlier, the soft lighting that transformed the room into a haven of calm. Naomi encouraged him to take slow breaths, focusing on the present moment, and he responded with subtle movements, the tension in his shoulders easing as he absorbed the stability and reassurance of her presence. She explained each small action, from adjusting his seating position to ensuring the tea remained within easy reach, her voice a gentle guide through the process of regaining comfort and confidence. The interplay of soft light, warmth, and careful attention created a rhythm that both anchored and empowered, each gesture reinforcing trust, patience, and dignity. Ethan began to reflect on the events of the past night and morning, the stark contrast between vulnerability and control, realizing that his usual markers of power were temporarily irrelevant in the face of human attentiveness and competence. Naomi moved methodically, checking his posture, guiding small movements to promote circulation and flexibility, all the while speaking in measured, reassuring tones that emphasized the gradual reclamation of autonomy and control. The apartment, with its modest furnishings and careful arrangement, had become a sanctuary of learning and understanding, a place where authority and respect were earned through thoughtful, deliberate care rather than assumed through status. Outside, the fading daylight and the distant murmur of the city underscored the peaceful containment within, a space where attentiveness and empathy dictated the flow of events, and where a single person's deliberate actions could provide profound security and influence. Naomi remained vigilant, observing every subtle cue, offering verbal guidance and reassurance, and creating an environment where Ethan could not only recover physically, but also begin to internalize the lessons of patience, attentiveness, and trust. Each movement she made was purposeful, reinforcing the principles of respect and moral authority, showing that power could manifest through character, observation, and the deliberate exercise of care. Ethan's awareness deepened as he experienced the subtle but powerful inversion of typical hierarchies, recognizing that vulnerability and reliance on another did not diminish his value, but highlighted the extraordinary skill, patience, and integrity of the person assisting him. The room held a quiet intensity, the kind that comes from shared understanding and mutual recognition, each moment layered with the weight of experience and reflection. Naomi adjusted the final details of the seating and blankets, ensured that his tea was comfortable to hold, and allowed a space of calm to settle over the apartment, a moment of equilibrium where both could reflect on the significance of the events that had brought them here. The warmth of the fading light, the subtle rhythms of care, and the deliberate attentiveness of Naomi created a space where dignity, trust, and human connection were restored, reinforcing the lesson that true power is expressed through empathy, patience, and deliberate, thoughtful action rather than wealth or status, found in deliberate care and moral integrity.